My name is Deb Veeder. I am the Adopt a Stream Director for the state of Mississippi. I work for Mississippi Wildlife Federation under a grant from the Department of Environmental Quality and EPA. What we're going to do is I'm kind of going to go over a general overview of aquatics and ecology and things like that. And then we'll talk about water and water quality and non-point source pollution. And then we'll talk about macroinvertebrates or bugs that tell different types of water quality. And then hopefully we'll have time to do a little bit of mapping, because usually I put some mapping on some of the testing and that. So we will get started. If you have questions, just raise your hand or shout out or something, whatever, and we'll kind of go from there. Okay. Watersheds. Does anybody know what a watershed is? I'm sorry, what? Not quite. That's groundwater. Yes. Kind of. Yep. A watershed is basically the land area from which water, sediment, and dissolved solids flow to a stream, river, or other common water source. Healthy streams depend on healthy watersheds. There are 10 major watershed basins in the state of Mississippi. Those are there. There is a picture of this in your folders on that. Know the different watershed basins. There are several different parts to a watershed, everything from your wetlands and your tributaries, the floodplain area, the headwaters. But some of the important ones are the riparian zone, which basically is the land that occurs along the edges of rivers, streams, lakes, and other water bodies. Sometimes they're called riparian woodlands, forests, riparian buffers. These areas, the benefits of these is to reduce floods, improve and protect water quality, store water, reduce excessive erosion, and enhance wildlife habitat with cover and shade. Another part of these areas is called a wetland, and a wetland is also a function of a buffer. What is that? Okay. Between the land and the water, they are transition zones where the water flows and that, cycling nutrients and the energy of the sun meet to produce a unique ecosystem. What's important is that they are determined, if it is a wetland or not, by the hydrology of the area, the hydric soils, and the vegetation, the hydric vegetation. The different wetland types, some of them are swamps, you have marshes, bogs, and posins. And all these riparian zones and wetlands are important mainly to whatever's going on around them. In other words, if somebody wants to build a shopping center, they're probably not nearly as important, but they are to the rest of us. Because of the fact that they are important, though, for wildlife habitat, fish habitat, recreation, endangered species. A lot of endangered species live in these areas. Education and research, water quality, erosion control. Stream ecology, the study of freshwater ecosystems like streams and rivers and the factors that control their functioning and biological diversity. We usually look at the chemical, biological, and physical characteristics of the stream. Chemical and biological characteristics, a lot of times we do water quality testing, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, and look at the macroinvertebrates that inhabit the stream. That helps tell us water quality. We'll look at some of them in a little while also. But various physical characteristics that work together are things from soil, streamside vegetation, slope, rainfall, temperature, and of course, human activity. What we are doing around that stream affects what's going on in that stream. Pollution. You all know what pollution is. The introduction of harmful materials into the environment. You have point source and non-point source pollution. Point source comes from a single identifiable point, like a pipe or either smokestacks or a pipe coming out from a factory or something. That's point source. We can point to where it's coming from. Non-point source pollution is basically polluted runoff. When it rains, the rain picks up all sorts of things and takes it across the land into our streams and rivers. Non-point source pollution is really the leading type of problems that cause the most problems versus point source, because there's a lot of laws protecting and regulating what's going on with point source. But non-point source pollution comes from all of us. So therefore, we have to kind of regulate ourselves. Different things that cause non-point source pollution, everything from farms and agriculture to the city to construction to us in our own neighborhoods. Agriculture, basically a couple of different things is when farmers plant the area and then they take all the crops off, they're not trying to either overuse chemicals or cause any problems, but one of the biggest problems happens is if they take all the crops off and there's a bunch of bare soil there, then when it rains, the rain's going to pick up all that dirt and take it across the land into our streams and rivers. There's nothing holding it there. So one thing we'd like them to do is maybe leave the root system. It's called limited till, and so it leaves the root system, so when it rains, it kind of has to go in between all those roots, and it doesn't move that soil as easily. Having a buffer zone. Something that basically when it gets up, that soil gets up to that certain area, riparian area, wetland area, it'll slow it down, clean it out. Having cows in the creek. What might a cow do in the creek if they're allowed to stay there? What? Okay, what do you do after you drink? What do you do after you eat and drink? What? You poop, guys. It's not as much, the pee is one problem, but the poop is the real big problem. Cow manure, yes, is fertilizer. But that's one of the problems because of the fact that it's usually concentrated in that area. So therefore, all those cows are all pooping right there. Do you want to be swimming next to their pooping? Neither do the fish usually. But what happens too is that once all those plants start growing because of all that manure and fertilizer in that water, then once they start dying, they start taking the oxygen out of the water. When they start, because of the decomposition, when they take the oxygen out of the water, what happens to the fish? They die. So therefore we get a fish kill. So we don't like the cows pooping in the water. Forestry, improper forestry. You know, if they clear cut up to the edge of a creek and so all that mud or any debris is falling into the creek. Clear cutting in general, cutting on a hill and not making sure that that bank is stabilized. Construction. One of the big things with construction is that they're supposed to have a silt fence. If they have a silt fence and they put it up properly, then it should keep that soil on that piece of property. The problem is most of the time they don't bother to put it up correctly. So mud's going over, around them, etc. Channelization, straightening of a stream. When a stream is straightened, basically, you know, streams meander like a snake, right? When you straighten a stream, you go from A to B all of a sudden like whoosh. So water goes a lot faster, so it can pick up the mud or any other nutrients and stuff and take them downstream a lot faster. Instead of slowing down in the curves and dropping out some of that sediment, it just goes straight down. Surface mining of sand, different minerals in that can cause problems if they don't have some type of buffer zone between that mine and the creek. Household wastewater disposal, septic tanks. Any of you here have a septic tank? okay? Do you have the old ones or the new ones? Do you know? Old ones are basically where they have a big tank out in the backyard. Everything from the house goes into that tank, and then you have to make sure it gets pumped out every 5 to 7 years or so. Otherwise, that happens where it's all the pipes bust and then it's all over your yard. Yes, I had a little boy down in Hurley, down south, that said he could no longer play in his backyard because their septic tank busted all over the backyard. So, yeah, you don't want to have to play in sewage. The newer ones I know have more of a wetland theme type thing where it's taken out through a number of different ways and the water's cleaned as it goes out and goes out into some type of field that is a lot cleaner. They say you can drink it. I don't think I would, but you know, to each his own. Urban and commercial. Storm drains. All right, good. Storm drains. Storm drains drain directly to a creek or a stream. They are not part of the sewer system. So anything that goes down that storm drain goes directly to a creek. So therefore, whether it be any chemicals, whether it be mud, etc., all goes down to the creek. Now, a couple of things is you may think, well, what's the big deal? Mud and some of that, the chemicals could be a problem, but the dirt and that, creeks have dirt in them anyway, right? But you start filling up those storm drains with the mud, the litter, etc. The capacity used to be this much that they could take away when it rained, especially hard. Now it's only this, and you get flooding a lot easier. Also, all that extra sediment and that going down into the creek can cover the gills of fish. It can make it difficult for them to see their prey. It can cover their eggs and make reproduction a problem. Washing your car, since most of you are probably close at least to driving age, if not past there already. If you wash your car at home, do me a favor and rinse it off into the grass. Not down the driveway, and then make sure that driveway ends up going down the road, because then all that soap is going down to my storm drain. And then it'll go down to the creek. If you wash that soap into the grass, what happens is then it will filter it out, and most likely no soap or any of those chemicals will end up getting into the creek, into the street and into the creek. And it shouldn't harm your grass, or you're using something that probably is harming your car. So, golf courses, they've gotten better. They're using a lot more riparian zones or buffer zones to kind of any chemicals that they use. They're trying to leave areas that will kind of filter these things out. We actually have 2 environmentally friendly golf courses in Mississippi, one in Diamond Head and one in Van Cleve. Which they're both south. Sedimentation from construction, from straightening a stream, etc. All that dirt can cause all sorts of problems. Like I said, cover gills, cover eggs for reproduction, etc. Litter, you guys have all seen litter. Litter comes in all shapes and sizes. And unfortunately, people leaving things behind when they tube or kayak or whatever going down a creek. The Mississippi River is the 3rd largest drainage basin in the world. It drains 41% of the continental United States and 2 Canadian provinces. And it eventually empties into the Mississippi Sound, where freshwater and seawater mix. And what happens is we've created a dead zone, and it's one of the larger ones. It ebbs and flows as to the size depending on the time of year. But basically, nothing survives there. It's hypoxic, low oxygen. But all that stuff coming down from above in the United States ends up there and ends up causing all sorts of problems. So, some best management practices to help reduce non-point source pollution. If you're plowing on a hill or something, is contour planting. Let's see, I can do this. Right there is kind of the no-till, limited till, where you leave the root system in the ground so that it helps hold that soil there. Hay bales, silt fences, planting trees. This right here is kind of interesting because of the fact that you guys all know, you've seen parking lots where then all of a sudden you have a curb and then you have a little median or something. And then all that water is running down that curb. This basically is that it's flat with the parking lot and it goes down into the, instead of a median that's basically lowered, lower than the parking lot. And all that water goes in there, and then when it fills up to a certain point, plus it usually helps to filter some of it out with all the grasses and stuff in there, the water is cleaner as it goes down into a storm drain or something that's there. Practices that individuals can do to reduce non-point source pollution, anything from doing cleanups, to making sure your septic is cleaned out, septic tank is cleaned out, mulching, planting trees, recycling, using pesticides and fertilizers wisely. In other words, read. It's not so much that we can't use these. Something more organic, natural, of course, is better. But if you're going to use pesticides and fertilizers, make sure you read the directions. There's directions there for a reason. You're always told to read directions on different things. This is important because, we have a bad habit, and I know we all do in our backyards. As adults, we forget how to read. And we don't like that anthill, and we're going to make sure it dies and overdue. But what happens is a lot of that extra ends up washing off into the storm drains and then down into the creek. So we don't want to use all that extra. We want to make sure we know what we're putting out there. And if you can put something more organic, something for anthills is cornmeal. If you sprinkle cornmeal on it, they don't like that and they will die. So now that you're here, the word of the Lorax is perfectly clear. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not.